There's a peculiar silence that follows betrayal. It doesn't crash like thunder or screech like tires on asphalt. It settles, delicate and poisonous, like the first frost of winter. I remember the exact moment 14 years of loyalty crystallized into ice within my chest. The cherry pie sat untouched in the center of the mahogany conference table, my father's ridiculous tradition for special announcements. No one ever ate it, but we all knew what it meant. My name is Maggie Whitaker. For 14 years, I'd been the backbone of Hartman and Lowell Financial Strategies, a firm my father co-founded in Boston with his college roommate before I was born. I'd postponed graduate school to join when they needed help during the 2008 crisis. I'd canceled my honeymoon when the Lexbrook account was teetering. I'd built our compliance framework from scratch when regulations tightened after 2011. I'd transformed the company from a traditional investment advisory into a cutting-edge strategic powerhouse with over $2 billion in managed assets. And on that Tuesday in April, I watched my father place his hand on my younger brother's shoulder and announce, "The board has unanimously voted to promote Dylan Whitaker to managing partner, effective immediately." The room erupted in rehearsed applause. My father's eyes skipped over mine as he continued his speech about new blood and the future generation. My brother Dylan, who had been with the company for all of 5 years, who had once sent an email to our biggest banking client asking if they could recommend escorts in Vegas, and who regularly showed up at 10 a.m. claiming he was networking the night before, smiled with practiced humility. The conference room felt suddenly airless. My coffee cooled untouched before me as various board members took turns congratulating my brother. I noted the absence of surprise on their faces. This decision had been made long before today's meeting. I was the only one who hadn't known. "Maggie," my father finally acknowledged me. "You'll continue heading strategy. Of course, you and Dylan will make an excellent team." I stood, smoothed my skirt, and extended my hand to my brother. "Congratulations, Dylan." My voice sounded distant to my own ears. "I'm sure you'll do great things." He grinned, too relieved by my apparent acceptance to notice the winter in my eyes. "Thanks, Mags. Couldn't have done it without you." I nodded, gathered my notes, and walked out of the conference room with measured steps. My assistant Jessica looked up as I passed her desk, her expression shifting from cheerful to concerned. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Perfectly fine," I replied. "Dylan's the new managing partner." Her eyes widened slightly. "Oh, I see. I'll be working remotely this afternoon. Please reschedule my 3 o'clock with Miles." Jessica nodded, already reaching for her phone. I continued toward the elevator, past the photos of my father and Lawrence Lowell shaking hands with politicians and financial titans, past the award plaques I had written applications for, past the conference room where I had landed the Anders Blake account that had doubled our firm's value overnight. As the elevator doors closed, I made my decision. I wasn't going to fight this. I wasn't going to plead my case or demand an explanation. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of my anger or my tears. No, I was going to do something far worse. I was going to leave. I drove home in silence, my mind unusually clear. The characteristic Boston spring rain tapped against my windshield as I pulled into the driveway of my Beacon Hill brownstone, purchased with my own money, not family wealth or connections. I'd worked for everything I had. Inside, I changed into comfortable clothes, made a cup of tea, and opened my laptop. I updated my LinkedIn profile with 5 simple words: exploring new opportunities, open to connections. No resignation letter, no dramatic exit, just a digital status change that would send ripples through our tight-knit industry. I'd barely closed my laptop when my phone began buzzing with notifications. Colleagues from other firms, former classmates from Harvard Business School, recruiters I'd politely declined for years, and there, among them all, a direct message from Anders Blake himself, CEO of Strathmere Partners and Hartman and Lowell's largest client. "Call me, anytime." I smiled for the first time that day. Anders had always recognized my value, even when my own family couldn't. His company had been with us for 6 years, entirely because of my relationship with him. He'd once told me over dinner that Hartman and Lowell is really just Maggie Whitaker to us. I didn't call him immediately. Instead, I checked my company email. Nothing from my father, nothing from Dylan. Several confused messages from team members who'd seen my LinkedIn update. Apparently, the company hadn't announced my departure because they didn't know yet. Perfect. I slept surprisingly well that night. When morning came, I made myself a proper breakfast, something I rarely had time for on workdays. I was savoring my second cup of coffee when my phone rang. My father's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. He called again immediately, then again. On the fourth attempt, I answered. Maggie. My father's voice was tight, controlled panic barely concealed. Anders Blake called. They're pulling their business. I took a slow sip of coffee. That's unfortunate. Unfortunate it's catastrophic. He wouldn't give a reason. He just said they're terminating effective immediately and transferring all assets by end of week. We're talking about $30 million in annual fees. Have you checked the other accounts? I asked mildly. A pause. What do you mean? Just a suggestion. You might want to call Carter and Miles and Tallon Group. The silence that followed told me he understood. What did you do? He finally whispered. I didn't do anything, Dad. I just updated my LinkedIn profile. I could hear his breathing, heavy and uneven. This is about yesterday, isn't it, for God's sake? Maggie, we can talk about this. Come to the office. I'm afraid I can't. I'm exploring new opportunities, as my profile clearly states. You're throwing a tantrum because your brother got a promotion. This is childish. Maggie, this is... I have to go. Dad, I have another call coming in. Good luck with everything. I disconnected before he could respond. There was no other call. But Anders Blake's message still sat unanswered on my phone. Now felt like the right time. He answered on the first ring. Maggie, I was hoping you'd call. I understand you had a conversation with my father this morning. Anders chuckled. I did, though conversation might be generous. I delivered a message. May I ask why? Don't be coy, Maggie. It doesn't suit you. We both know why. The question is, what are you planning to do next? I smiled into the phone. I'm considering my options. Good. Meet me for lunch, the Bristol at noon. We have things to discuss. The Bristol was one of Boston's most exclusive restaurants, where business deals were negotiated over $200,000 bottles of wine and handshake agreements worth millions were sealed. I arrived 5 minutes early and was immediately escorted to a private dining room where Anders Blake was already waiting. At 62, Anders had the confidence of a man who had built his fortune from nothing, silver-haired and keen-eyed. He rose to greet me with a warm handshake. You look well for someone who just burned down her family's legacy, he remarked as we sat. I didn't burn anything, I replied, unfolding my napkin. I simply stepped away from the flames. Anders nodded appreciatively at the metaphor. Your father called me 3 times this morning. He offered to cut our fees by 20%. Desperate. Indeed. Your brother also called. He seemed to think I'd confused you with him in some way. Kept emphasizing he was the new managing partner. I couldn't help but smile. And what did you tell him? That I know exactly who runs what at Hartman and Lowell. Or ran, I should say. Anders paused as a waiter poured water. Let's not waste time, Maggie. You're leaving. I've pulled my business. The question is whether you'd like to bring it with you. To Strathmere Partners. Anders shook his head. No. To Whitaker Strategies. He slid a folder across the table. Inside was a term sheet with my name at the top. Seed funding, office space, back office support, a 40% equity stake in a new venture under my own name. You've been planning this, I said, scanning the detailed proposal. Let's say I've been prepared for this eventuality. Your family has systematically undervalued you for years. It was only a matter of time before you realized it. I looked up from the documents. And what do you get out of this arrangement? Anders smiled. The continued brilliance of Maggie Whitaker, without the dead weight of a legacy firm that can't recognize its most valuable asset. Plus, of course, a substantial return on investment when you inevitably surpass your father's company. You're assuming others will follow. I'm not assuming anything. Anders took a sip of water. Carter called me this morning asking where you were going. So did Janine from Tolland. Lexbrook's CFO texted me asking if you were starting your own shop. They're already following you. Maggie. They just need somewhere to go. The realization of my own power in that moment was dizzying. I'd always known I was good at what I did, that clients respected me, but I'd never fully understood how much of the firm's success was directly attributable to me alone. I'll need to review these terms with my lawyer, I said, closing the folder. Of course. Take your time. Anders signaled for the waiter. Though I should mention, your father has already started calling your client list, telling them you had a breakdown and were put on administrative leave. My stomach tightened. He what? It's a predictable move. Discredit the departed, make them seem unstable. Anders shrugged. It won't work, of course, but it does suggest you might want to move quickly. As we ate lunch, Anders outlined his vision for our partnership. By the time we finished, I had mentally committed to the plan, though I kept that to myself. Never show your full hand, even to allies, one of the first lessons my father had taught me. The irony wasn't lost on me. When I returned home, there were 17 missed calls from my father, 5 from Dylan, and 3 from Lawrence Lowell, my father's partner who had supposedly retired 5 years ago but still maintained an office and a vote on the board. I ignored them all and called my lawyer instead. By the end of the week, I had signed the partnership agreement with Anders. Whitaker Strategies was officially incorporated, with offices secured in a sleek high-rise on State Street, just 3 blocks from Hartman and Lowell. Close enough to be a daily reminder of my existence, but in a newer, more prestigious building. As I began setting up operations, I needed to review client files from my time at Hartman and Lowell. While I would never take proprietary information, I did have copies of all correspondence and deliverables I'd personally created. One needs a portfolio, after all. As I sorted through old documents, a file caught my attention. It was a compliance memo I'd supposedly authored 6 months earlier regarding risk disclosures for the Tolland Group, except I had no memory of writing it. I opened the PDF and examined the signature. Margaret G. Whitaker. But I never wrote my middle initial that way. The G had a distinctive curl I never used. Someone had forged my signature. I checked the document properties, last modified by Dylan Whitaker. My brother had not only forged my signature, but had done so on a compliance document that substantially misrepresented risk factors to one of our largest clients. Whether deliberately or through incompetence, he had created a massive liability and attributed it to me. I sat back in my chair, a cold rage building inside me. This wasn't just betrayal. This was sabotage. My brother had been setting me up to take a fall if anything went wrong. I made a copy of the document, ran it through forensic analysis software to verify the metadata, and then composed a simple email to Hartman and Lowell's legal department from an anonymous account. Subject due diligence alert. During routine compliance review, the attached document raised significant concerns regarding signature authenticity and risk disclosure accuracy. Recommend immediate internal investigation before regulators become involved. I attached the file with all its damning metadata and sent it without a signature. Then I waited. It took precisely 48 hours for the internal chaos to spill into public view. A junior member of the legal team, likely panicking about potential regulatory implications, shared details with a friend at a competing firm. That friend mentioned it to a financial blogger known for industry gossip. By Monday morning, the story was circulating on fintech forums. Trouble at Hartman and Lowell sources report potential compliance fraud involving newly appointed managing partner. No names were explicitly mentioned, but anyone in the industry could connect the dots. The timing of my departure and Dylan's promotion was too perfect to be coincidental. My phone rang. Jessica, my former assistant. Maggie, she whispered when I answered. It's insane here. They're doing a full compliance audit. Your brother is threatening to fire anyone seen talking to you. And she hesitated. And what, Jess? Someone accidentally uploaded the full client contact list to the general Slack channel while trying to figure out who else might leave. It showed all the clients who've been asking for your contact information. I smiled. That is unfortunate. How many are there? 37, she said, including all of the top 20. Thank you for letting me know. Jessica, if you're ever looking for a change, you know where to find me. I might take you up on that soon, she replied before hanging up. The LinkedIn page for Hartman and Lowell was already filling with comments. Industry colleagues asking about restructuring rumors, former clients expressing concern about recent news, and my personal favorite, from a rival investment manager, is the curly-haired guy really your chief strategist now? Dylan's trademark curly hair had become his unintentional brand identity, and now his albatross. I focused on building my new firm, reaching out personally to former clients, and assembling a team of the industry's best talent, many of whom had been waiting for an opportunity to work with me directly, rather than through the hierarchy of Hartman and Lowell. Within a month, we had secured commitments from 12 major clients, including 6 who had left my father's firm. Our projected first-year revenue already exceeded our most optimistic targets. Anders was thrilled. Then came the invitation that would deliver the final blow to my former family business. The Valencia Financial Strategy Conference was the most prestigious event in our industry calendar. This year, Hartman and Lowell was being honored with the Family Legacy Award for 3 decades of excellence. My father was scheduled to give an acceptance speech at the gala dinner. I had been invited months ago to be the keynote speaker for the main conference, an invitation I had accepted while still at Hartman and Lowell. The organizers contacted me to confirm I would still be participating, now representing Whitaker Strategies. Absolutely, I told them. I wouldn't miss it for the world. The conference was held at the magnificent Valencia Resort in Newport, Rhode Island. As I checked into my suite, I spotted my father and brother in the lobby, surrounded by the remaining loyalists from the firm. They pretended not to notice me, but the stiffening of my father's shoulders told me he was acutely aware of my presence. Ms. Whitaker, welcome back to Valencia. The concierge greeted me warmly. We've upgraded you to our presidential suite this year. That's very kind, but I didn't request an upgrade. I replied, confused. The conference committee insisted, your keynote is the most anticipated session of the event. She lowered her voice conspiratorially. Registration numbers doubled after your company announcement. I smiled, accepting the key card. In that case, thank you. As the bellhop escorted me to my suite, we passed a familiar figure in the corridor, Victoria Prentice, chairwoman of the Financial Strategies Association and the conference's organizer. Maggie, she exclaimed, embracing me. Perfect timing. I was just coming to find you. Victoria had been a mentor of mine for years, one of the few women who had broken through finance's glass ceiling in the 1990s. Is everything all right with my keynote schedule? I asked. Everything's perfect. That's not why I was looking for you. She glanced around to ensure we were alone. I wanted to give you a heads up. There's been some pressure from certain quarters to modify your speaking slot. Let me guess, my father. She nodded. Robert suggested it might be more appropriate if you presented earlier in the day, not in the prime slot. He implied your departure from Hartman and Lowell might make your keynote less relevant. And what did you tell him? Victoria's eyes sparkled with mischief. I told him that the conference committee makes programming decisions based on merit and audience interest, not family politics, and that your session had the highest pre-registration of any in our history. I laughed. I bet he loved that. He was not amused, she confirmed. But there's more. The Legacy Award presentation, he tried to move it so it wouldn't be the night before your keynote. Strategic timing, I mused. He doesn't want the juxtaposition. Precisely. But again, the committee declined to alter the schedule. She squeezed my arm. Just be prepared for some tension at the gala dinner. When am I not prepared, Victoria? She smiled. That's my girl. Now, I have to run donor cocktails in 15 minutes. We'll catch up properly tomorrow. After she left, I entered my suite and gasped despite myself. The presidential suite was stunning, a spacious living area with panoramic ocean views, a dining room that could seat 12, and a master bedroom with a balcony overlooking the resort's famous gardens. On the coffee table sat a bottle of champagne with a note, "To disruption," and dears. I smiled and texted him, "Sweet is excessive, champagne is appreciated." He replied immediately, "Nothing excessive about recognizing power. See you at dinner." I spent the afternoon reviewing my keynote slides one final time, making subtle adjustments to ensure my message would land with maximum impact. Then I dressed for the gala dinner, selecting a deep blue gown that was elegant without being flashy power dressing for a formal event. The ballroom was already buzzing when I arrived. Over 300 industry leaders mingled beneath crystal chandeliers. The elite of financial strategy gathered in one room. I spotted Anders immediately, holding court at a table near the front. "Maggie," he greeted me warmly, rising to pull out my chair. Perfect timing. Our table was a statement in itself. Anders had seated me with the CEOs of 3 major financial institutions, all former Hartman and Lowell clients who had followed me to Whitaker Strategies. The message was clear: power had shifted. From across the ballroom, I could see the Hartman and Lowell contingent, significantly smaller than in previous years. My father sat stiffly at their table, Dylan beside him, both in matching tuxedos that suddenly seemed slightly old-fashioned among the more modern attire favored by younger industry leaders. "Your father's been watching the door for the past 20 minutes, Anders murmured. "I think he was hoping you wouldn't show and miss his moment of glory. I wouldn't dream of it." Dinner was served, an exquisite 5-course meal paired with wines I barely tasted. My attention was focused on the stage, where Victoria would soon begin the awards presentation. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victoria's voice silenced the room as she took the podium. "Welcome to the 35th Annual Valencia Financial Strategy Conference Awards Gala." She proceeded through minor recognitions: the Young Innovator Award, the Sustainability Leadership Award, before reaching the main event. "Our final honor tonight is the Family Legacy Award, recognizing multi-generational excellence in financial services. This year's recipient has been a cornerstone of the Boston financial community for 3 decades. Please join me in honoring Hartman and Lowell Financial Strategies, represented by founder and CEO Robert Whitaker and newly appointed managing partner Dylan Whitaker." The applause was polite but not overwhelming as my father and brother made their way to the stage. I clapped precisely as long as courtesy demanded, my expression pleasantly neutral. My father stepped to the microphone, the spotlight highlighting the silver in his hair. "Thank you, Victoria, and thank you to the Valencia Conference Committee for this tremendous honor." He launched into a well-rehearsed speech about the firm's humble beginnings, its growth through market turbulence, its commitment to client service. He spoke of values that transcend generations and adapting to changing times while maintaining core principles. "And that brings me to the future of Hartman and Lowell," he continued. "In every successful family business, there comes a moment of transition, when the torch passes to new leadership. I'm proud to announce that this transition is well underway, with my son Dylan stepping into the role of managing partner." Dylan stepped forward, nodding humbly as scattered applause acknowledged him. "Together," my father continued, "we're guiding Hartman and Lowell into a new era of innovation and growth, building on 3 decades of excellence while embracing new ideas and approaches." Neither of them mentioned my name or my 14 years of contribution to the company being celebrated. It was as if I had never existed, a ghost erased from the family portrait. I sipped my wine, maintaining my composure. Anders leaned close. "Rewriting history is the privilege of losers," he whispered. "Tomorrow, you write the future." I smiled slightly, touching my glass to his. When my father finished his speech, Victoria returned to the podium. "Thank you, Robert, for those inspiring words. And now, I'd like to remind everyone that tomorrow's keynote address will be delivered by Maggie Whitaker, founder and CEO of Whitaker Strategies, on Disruption as strategy breaking legacy models in financial services. If you haven't registered yet, I suggest you do so quickly. It's our most anticipated session and nearing capacity. The look on my father's face as Victoria deliberately highlighted my competing session was worth every moment of the uncomfortable dinner. His legacy award suddenly seemed like yesterday's news, while my keynote represented tomorrow's headline. I applauded politely along with everyone else, my expression neutral. Several industry peers at nearby tables glanced at me with sympathy or curiosity. They knew what had happened. Everyone did. After dinner, I circulated briefly, accepting congratulations on my new venture and deflecting questions about my departure from Hartman and Lowell with practiced grace. "I'm focused on the future," became my standard response. As the evening wound down, I found myself face to face with Lawrence Lowell, my father's longtime partner who had supposedly retired years ago. "Maggie," he greeted me, his voice warm despite the circumstances. "You look well." "Thank you, Lawrence. Enjoying retirement." He grimaced slightly. "Less so recently. Your father's called me back for consultation more times in the past month than in the previous 5 years. Challenging times at Hartman and Lowell." I asked innocently. "You know very well they are." That evening, my phone buzzed with a news alert from a financial industry publication. Hartman and Lowell announces restructuring amid client exodus. The article detailed how the firm had lost over 40% of its managed assets in just 6 weeks, with rumors of staff layoffs and possible downsizing of their prestigious Boston headquarters. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt something closer to peace. My point had been made, justice, in its way, had been served. 3 months later, Whitaker Strategies released its first quarterly report. Our assets under management had already surpassed half of Hartman and Lowell's remaining portfolio. Industry analysts were calling us the fastest-growing boutique firm in New England. We had a waiting list of potential clients. I composed a brief email to my father. "Subject your legacy, my rules, Dad." Attached is our quarterly report. Thought you might be interested in the numbers. You raised me to believe that excellence would be rewarded. You were right, just not in the way you expected. Dylan can have the title. I'll take the clients. "Maggie." I didn't expect a response, and I didn't receive one. That same week, an industry blog published an embarrassing email exchange in which Dylan had confused basic investment terms while attempting to reassure a nervous client. He was becoming a cautionary tale in financial circles, the nepotism hire who sank a prestigious firm. Hartman and Lowell began losing staff. First the junior analysts, then more senior strategists. And finally, Lawrence Lowell himself announced he was coming out of retirement to stabilize the situation, a vote of no confidence in both my father and brother if ever there was one. I watched it all unfold from my corner office on the 32nd floor. The Boston skyline spread before me. The building that housed Hartman and Lowell was visible just a few blocks away. I could almost see into the conference room where, not so long ago, a cherry pie had sat untouched while my family betrayed me. Anders stopped by late one evening as I was finishing work. "You did it," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "Exactly as I knew you would." I closed my laptop. "We did it. Your investment made it possible." He waved away the comment. "My money was the least important factor. You would have found a way without me." "Perhaps, but it was easier this way." Anders studied me for a moment. "Are you satisfied, now that you've brought them to their knees?" I considered the question carefully. This wasn't about revenge. No, it was about correction. They made a fundamental error in judgment. The market responded accordingly. I smiled slightly. It's just business, after all. Anders laughed. "You are magnificent, Maggie Whitaker." Utterly magnificent. After he left, I stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. In the reflection of the glass, I could see myself poised, successful, vindicated. Behind me, the office hummed with the activity of the team I had built, the legacy I was creating. I thought about my father and brother, scrambling to save what remained of their firm. I thought about the forged document, The lies, the years of being overlooked despite my contributions. Then I let it all go. They had handed my brother a legacy. I had built an empire. He got the title, I had the clients. One forged document, 4 phone calls, and a keynote speech later. Hartman and Lowell was history. But this wasn't a story about revenge. It was about remembering who built the empire when it crumbled. And I was just getting started. I stood there for a long time, watching the city lights blink on and off in the growing darkness. A text from Anders interrupted my thoughts. Dinner tomorrow, bringing potential investors from Singapore. I typed back a quick confirmation and slipped my phone into my pocket. The rapid growth of Whitaker Strategies was exceeding even my ambitious projections. At this rate, we would surpass Hartman and Lowell's former peak within a year. My assistant knocked gently on the door. Maggie. Sorry to interrupt, but the team is heading out for drinks to celebrate the Lexbrook expansion. They're hoping you'll join. This was the difference between my leadership and my father's. He'd always maintained rigid separation between management and staff. I preferred to blur those lines, to create a culture of collaboration rather than hierarchy. Tell them I'll be down in 5 minutes, I replied with a smile. As I gathered my things, I caught sight of a small framed photo on my desk, the only personal item in my minimalist office. It showed a much younger me standing beside my father on my first day at Hartman and Lowell. I was 24, fresh out of undergrad, postponing Harvard Business School to help the family firm navigate the 2008 financial crisis. My father's arm was around my shoulders, his face beaming with pride. We'll build something great together. He had promised that day. And we had, just not in the way either of us had imagined. I placed the photo face down in my desk drawer and switched off the lights. The next morning, I woke to an unexpected email. The sender, Lawrence Lowell. Subject meeting request Maggie. I hope this finds you well. I'd like to meet privately to discuss a matter of mutual interest. My treat. Any place of your choosing. Lawrence. Lawrence had been my father's business partner for 30 years, but had stepped back from daily operations shortly before I joined the firm. He maintained a board seat and an honorary office, but rarely involved himself in company decisions, which made his tacit approval of Dylan's promotion all the more disappointing. I'd always considered him a mentor and ally. I was tempted to ignore the message, but curiosity won out. I suggested coffee at a small cafe near my office, deliberately casual and public. Lawrence was waiting when I arrived, looking older than I remembered. At 71, his once robust frame had thinned, but his mind remained sharp as ever. Maggie. He stood to greet me. You look well. Success suits you. Thank you, Lawrence. What can I do for you? He smiled at my directness. No small talk. Then, fair enough. He took a sip of coffee. I'm here about Hartman and Lowell. I assumed as much. The firm is in trouble, as you know. I raised an eyebrow. I'm aware. Your father is too proud to admit it, but we're facing a complete collapse if things continue as they are. The Legacy Award was supposed to shore up client confidence. Instead, my keynote reminded everyone why those clients had been with you in the first place. I finished for him. Lawrence nodded. Precisely. He leaned forward. I want to make you an offer. Come back. Not as an employee, as the managing partner. Dylan will step down. Your father will take on an emeritus role. You'll have complete control. I stared at him, momentarily speechless. Of all the scenarios I had imagined for this meeting, this hadn't been one of them. Why would I do that? I finally asked. Whitaker Strategies is thriving. We'll surpass Hartman and Lowell's market position within months. Because despite everything, it's still your family's legacy. Your grandfather was one of our first investors. Your name may not be on the door, but your DNA is in the foundation. I shook my head. You should have thought of that before letting my father hand my position to Dylan. Lawrence looked pained. I fought against it, Maggie. I was outvoted. By whom the board consists of you, my father, and 3 junior partners who never challenge either of you. He had the grace to look ashamed. Your father can be persuasive, and none of us anticipated your reaction. We thought you'd accept it and move on. That was your first mistake, I said, keeping my voice level. Your second was underestimating how much of the company's success was directly attributable to me. We know that now, Lawrence conceded, hence my offer. I studied him for a moment. Tell me something, Lawrence. The compliance document Dylan forged with my signature, did you know about that before it became public? His expression told me everything. I had concerns about some of the documentation. But you said nothing. I spoke to your father privately. He assured me that I had approved it. I finished. Despite the fact that I would never sign off on such grossly inadequate risk disclosures, Lawrence looked down at his coffee. Yes. And now that Hartman and Lowell is circling the drain, you want me to come back and save it? Yes, he admitted. I leaned back in my chair. The answer is no. Lawrence, not now, not ever. Maggie, please reconsider. For your father's sake, if nothing else, this will destroy him. My father destroyed our relationship when he chose Dylan over me, despite knowing I was more qualified. He destroyed his business when he let personal preference override sound judgment. I gathered my purse and stood. Those were his choices, not mine. Lawrence reached for my arm. What if we renamed it Whitaker, Hartman, and Lowell? Your name first. I gently removed his hand. My name is already first on my own company. Goodbye, Lawrence. I walked out without looking back, my heart pounding with an emotion I couldn't quite name. It wasn't triumph or anger or even vindication. It was something closer to grief mourning for what might have been if my family had seen my value before it was too late. Back at my office, I found Jessica waiting with an urgent message. Tallinn Group's CEO wanted to move an additional $200 million in assets under our management, but their legal team had questions about our capacity to handle the increased volume. Work was the perfect distraction. I threw myself into preparing for the Tallinn meeting, pushing thoughts of Lawrence and his offer from my mind. 3 days later, I received another unexpected communication, this time from my brother. A text message sent at 2 a.m. We need to talk. It's not what you think. I didn't know about the document. I deleted it without responding. Dylan tried again the next day, this time via email. Subject: please read Maggie. I know you hate me right now, and you have every right to, but I'm begging you to meet with me. There's more to this situation than you know. I never forged your signature. I'm being set up, just like you were. Dylan. This gave me pause. It seemed unlikely that Dylan was innocent. The metadata on the document clearly showed his user credentials. But the timing of the email was curious. Why reach out now, weeks after the damage was done? Against my better judgment, I replied. The Metropolitan Bar area, 7 p.m. You have 15 minutes. The Metropolitan was a hotel bar known for its privacy and discretion, a place where business competitors could meet without raising eyebrows. I arrived early and selected a corner table with a clear view of the entrance. Dylan arrived precisely on time, looking haggard. His signature curls were flattened as if he'd been running his hands through them repeatedly. The confident swagger he'd displayed at his promotion announcement was nowhere to be seen. Thank you for meeting me, he said, sliding into the seat across from me. 15 minutes, I reminded him, checking my watch. He nodded. I'll get right to it. The compliance document with your forged signature, I didn't create it. The metadata says otherwise. I know. Someone used my credentials. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. I think it was Dad. I stared at him, searching for signs of deception. That's a serious accusation. I know how it sounds, but think about it. Maggie. Who benefits most from driving a wedge between us who's been manipulating both of us for years? Why would he do that? Dylan sighed. Control. He's always needed to be the one pulling the strings. When I was promoted, it wasn't because Dad suddenly thought I was more qualified than you. It was because he knew he could control me in ways he never could with you. And the forged document, insurance, If anything went wrong with Tollin's account, the blame would fall on you. When you left so suddenly after my promotion, he needed someone else to take the fall. I processed this information carefully. It wasn't entirely implausible. My father's need for control was legendary in the family, and there had always been an undercurrent of resentment at my independence. Even if what you're saying is true, I said slowly, why tell me now? What do you want? Dylan looked genuinely pained. I want out. Maggie, the firm is collapsing. Dad's becoming increasingly erratic. He threatened to remove Lawrence from the board when Lawrence suggested bringing you back. Lawrence told you about our meeting. He told everyone. He thought it would pressure Dad into reaching out to you himself. Dylan ran a hand through his hair. But Dad refused. He said he'd rather see the company fail than admit he was wrong about you. This, at least, sounded exactly like my father. I'm sorry for what happened, Dylan continued. I should have turned down the promotion. I knew it was yours by right, but I was so desperate for his approval. We all were, I admitted. That was his greatest leverage over us. So what now? Dylan asked. I can't stay at Hartman and Lowell. No one in the industry will hire me after this disaster. My reputation is ruined. I studied my brother. We had never been close. The 7-year age gap, and our father's habit of pitting us against each other had seen to that. But beneath the resentment and competition, there was still a flicker of familial connection. What skills do you actually have? I asked bluntly. Dylan looked surprised, then laughed humorlessly. Honestly, I'm good with people. Not clients. I know I screwed up the Vegas email, but teams, staff. I can motivate people, build morale. I'm just not a strategist like you. I nodded slowly. This matched my observations from our years working together. Dylan had always been popular with junior staff, organizing office events and remembering birthdays. It was the executive responsibilities he fumbled. Whitaker Strategies is expanding rapidly, I said carefully. We're opening a Chicago office next quarter. We'll need someone to oversee operations there. Not strategy, we have a team for that, but someone to build culture, manage the day-to-day environment, recruit local talent. Dylan's eyes widened. Are you offering me a job? I'm considering it, I corrected. If and only if you can prove what you've told me about the forged document. I need evidence that Dad was behind it, not you. I've been trying to find proof for weeks, Dylan admitted. But Dad's careful. He doesn't leave trails. Everyone leaves trails, I replied. You just need to know where to look. I finished my drink and stood. You have 1 week, find me proof, and we'll talk about Chicago. As I walked away, Dylan called after me. What about Dad? What happens to him if I can prove this? I paused. That depends on what you find. The truth was, I didn't know what I would do if Dylan actually produced evidence implicating our father. Part of me hoped he wouldn't find anything, that this was just another attempt at manipulation. The alternative meant accepting that my father's betrayal ran even deeper than I had imagined. The next day brought unexpected news from an industry publication, Hartman and Lowell exploring merger options. According to anonymous sources, my father was in talks with Demarest Financial, a larger firm known for acquiring struggling boutique companies at bargain prices. Anders forwarded the article to me with a single question mark. I responded, watching with interest. In reality, I was more than interested, I was concerned. A merger would complicate my plans for Whitaker Strategies' continued growth. If Hartman and Lowell's remaining clients were absorbed into Demarest's massive portfolio, my competitive advantage, intimate knowledge of those clients' needs, would be diluted. I reached out to my contacts at several of Hartman and Lowell's remaining significant clients, ostensibly to check in on recent market developments. Each conversation eventually turned to the merger rumors. We're not happy about it, confided the CFO of a manufacturing conglomerate. Demarest is too big. We'd be lost in their system. Have you considered alternatives? I asked casually. Such as diversifying your advisory relationships, maintaining flexibility. The CFO chuckled. You mean moving some assets to Whitaker Strategies before the merger goes through? I couldn't possibly comment on another firm's business decisions. I replied with a smile in my voice. By the end of the day, I had similar conversations with 4 key decision makers, seeds planted. I turned my attention to the Singapore investors Anders was bringing to dinner that evening. The dinner was a success. The Singaporean investment group was impressed with our rapid growth and innovative approach. They were particularly interested in our plans for expansion into Asian markets, something Hartman and Lowell had always resisted despite my advocacy. As coffee was served, my phone buzzed with a text from Dylan. Found something. Meet tomorrow. I excused myself briefly to respond, my office, 8 a.m. Dylan arrived the next morning looking even more disheveled than at our bar meeting. But there was an energy about him I hadn't seen in years. He placed a USB drive on my desk. What am I looking at? I asked. Dad's personal backup drive. He keeps it in his desk drawer. Old school doesn't trust cloud storage. I raised an eyebrow. You stole it. Borrowed, Dylan corrected. I'll return it before he notices it's missing. But first, you need to see what's on it. I plugged the drive into my computer and opened the File Explorer. It contained hundreds of folders, meticulously organized by date and category. Third folder from the bottom. Dylan directed, labeled Contingencies. I found it and clicked. Inside were subdirectories for various clients and projects. One was labeled simply MW. My initials. Inside that folder was a collection of documents, copies of my work, emails I had sent, performance reviews, and a folder labeled Exit Strategy. He was planning to push me out, I said slowly, the realization dawning. For how long? Based on the file dates, at least 2 years. Dylan replied, Open the document called Transition Plan. I did. It was a detailed roadmap for my gradual marginalization and eventual removal from the firm. My promotion to managing partner had been scheduled, then postponed, then canceled entirely. Notes in the margins explained the reasoning: too independent, challenging to control, clients too personally attached. The plan culminated in my voluntary departure, following a series of manufactured failures attributed to my judgment. The forged compliance document was just one element of a comprehensive strategy to undermine my reputation within the firm and the broader industry. He was setting me up to fail, I said, my voice hollow, all while telling me I was being groomed for leadership. Dylan nodded grimly. There's more. Look at the email exchange with Lawrence. I scrolled through the folder until I found it a series of messages between my father and Lawrence Lowell, discussing the Maggie situation. Lawrence had initially objected to the plan, arguing that my departure would damage the firm. My father's response chilled me. Better a controlled burn than a wildfire. If we wait until she has enough power to challenge me directly, we'll lose everything. This way, we manage the transition on our terms. Lawrence had eventually acquiesced, though his reluctance was evident in his terse replies. When did you find this? I asked Dylan. Last night, I couldn't sleep. So I went to the office to clear out my desk. Dad had left early for a meeting with Demarest. His drawer was unlocked. I leaned back in my chair, processing the implications. Why would he document his own duplicity so thoroughly? You know, Dad. Dylan shrugged. He documents everything. It's how his mind works. He probably never imagined anyone would see these files except him. I nodded slowly. My father's meticulous nature had always been both his strength and his weakness. He created systems for everything, unable to trust his memory or intuition. So now what? Dylan asked. I studied my brother's face. Despite everything, he seemed genuinely distressed by our father's betrayal. Perhaps I had misjudged him all these years, seen him as a willing conspirator when he was just another pawn in our father's games. Now, I said, making a decision. We proceed with the Chicago plan. You'll start as operations director, reporting directly to me. 3-month probation, standard benefits package, salary commensurate with the role, but not your previous position. Relief flooded Dylan's features. Thank you. Maggie, I won't let you down. See that you don't. I ejected the USB drive and handed it back to him. Return this. Say nothing to Dad. As far as he knows, you're still considering your options post Hartman and Lowell. What about the merger talks? Let them proceed, for now. After Dylan left, I sat in silence, contemplating my next move. The evidence on the drive had shifted something fundamental in my understanding of the past 14 years. Every perceived opportunity, every setback, every moment I had attributed to merit or bad luck had potentially been orchestrated by my father to maintain his control. The realization should have made me angry. Instead, it filled me with a strange calm. The final pieces of the puzzle had fallen into place. Now I could see the complete picture and plan accordingly. I called Anders. How quickly can we accelerate the Asia expansion? I asked without preamble. With the Singapore investment 6 months, maybe 4 if we push, he replied. Why? I want to announce it at next week's quarterly review, and I want to double our recruitment targets. Something I should know about. Hartman and Lowell won't be merging with Demarest, I said confidently. You sound very certain. I am. Call it inside information. After hanging up, I composed a careful email to Lawrence Lowell. Subject: our previous conversation, Lawrence. Upon reflection, I believe we should continue our discussion about the future of Hartman and Lowell. I've received some information that changes my perspective on recent events. Dinner at my home this Friday, 8 p.m. Maggie. His reply came within minutes. I'll be there. Next, I reached out to several key industry contacts people whose discretion I trusted implicitly. By the end of the day, I had arranged a series of private meetings for the following week. The final piece fell into place when Jessica knocked on my door late that afternoon. The Valencia conference organizers called, she said. They want you to chair next year's event, full creative control over the theme and speaker selection. I smiled. Tell them I accept. That Friday, Lawrence arrived at my home precisely on time, bearing an expensive bottle of wine, my father's favorite vintage, I noted with irony. Beautiful place, he commented as I led him through to the dining room. You've done well for yourself. Thank you. I designed most of it myself. We made small talk through the first course, neutral topics like the weather and recent market fluctuations. It wasn't until I served the main course that Lawrence broached the subject of our meeting. Your email suggested you might have reconsidered my offer, he said carefully. Not exactly, I replied. But I've been thinking about the future of Hartman and Lowell. Lawrence nodded encouragingly. The merger with Demarest is a mistake, I continued. It would destroy whatever value remains in the firm. I agree, Lawrence sighed. But your father is determined. He sees it as the only way to salvage his reputation. What if there were an alternative, a different kind of merger? Lawrence's eyebrows rose. With Whitaker Strategies, I thought you rejected that idea. I rejected coming back to work under my father, I clarified. I'm proposing something different, a true merger of equals, followed by a structured transition. Go on. Whitaker Strategies acquires a controlling interest in Hartman and Lowell. We merge operations under a new name, Whitaker Hartman. My father takes emeritus status with a generous consulting contract. You maintain your board seat and emeritus role. Dylan has already agreed to head our Chicago expansion. Lawrence studied me. Your father will never agree to this. He will when he sees the alternative, I said calmly. Which is? I took a sip of wine. I have copies of certain documents from his personal files, documents detailing his systematic plan to undermine me and force me out of the company. Documents that would be of great interest to the SEC given the compliance issues involved. Lawrence paled. You're threatening to report your own father to the regulators. I'm outlining the consequences of refusing a generous offer, I corrected. One that preserves his legacy and provides financial security for his retirement. This is unexpected. Is it you participated in his plan? Lawrence? Perhaps not enthusiastically, but you were complicit. Those same documents implicate you. He set down his fork. So this dinner is actually a shakedown. I prefer to think of it as a negotiation. I smiled. One that benefits everyone involved, especially the clients who would be ill-served by a Demarest acquisition. Lawrence was silent for several moments, weighing his options. Finally, he asked, "What exactly would this merger look like in practical terms?" I outlined my vision: a structured integration that would preserve the best elements of both firms while streamlining redundant functions. The Hartman and Lowell name would live on in a foundation we would establish to support financial education, a legacy project that would burnish my father's reputation rather than tarnish it. It could work, Lawrence admitted reluctantly. But convincing your father, that's where you come in, I said. He trusts you. If you present this as the best option, the only option that preserves any part of his legacy, he'll listen. And if he doesn't, then I'll do what's necessary to protect my clients and my company. I met his gaze steadily, but I'd prefer not to. By the time Lawrence left, we had a tentative agreement. He would approach my father over the weekend, present the merger as his own idea, and report back on Monday. The weekend passed slowly. I kept myself busy with work, reviewing expansion plans and drafting the announcement of Dylan's appointment to the Chicago office. On Sunday evening, I received a brief text from Lawrence, "Meeting tomorrow, 10 a.m., cautiously optimistic." Monday morning, I dressed with particular care a charcoal suit that conveyed authority without ostentation. I arrived at the Hartman and Lowell offices at precisely 9:55 a.m., my first visit since the day of Dylan's promotion. The receptionist's eyes widened at the sight of me. "Ms. Whitaker, Mr. Lowell said you might be coming." "I have a 10 a.m. with my father and Mr. Lowell," I confirmed. "Yes, of course. They're in the main conference room." As I walked through the familiar hallways, I noted the changes: empty desks, hushed conversations that stopped as I passed, the unmistakable atmosphere of a dying company. The conference room, the same one where Dylan's promotion had been announced, looked smaller somehow. My father sat at the head of the table, Lawrence to his right. The cherry pie tradition had been abandoned. Only coffee and water sat on the polished surface. "Maggie," my father acknowledged me with a stiff nod. At 65, he had always seemed ageless, vital. Now he looked every day of his years and more. "Dad," I replied, taking a seat across from Lawrence. "Thank you for agreeing to meet. Lawrence seems to think you have a proposal that might benefit us all," my father said, his tone carefully neutral. "I do." I opened my portfolio and removed 3 copies of a document, sliding one to each man and keeping one for myself. A preliminary term sheet for the merger of Hartman and Lowell and Whitaker Strategies. My father didn't touch the document. Lawrence outlined the general concept. I have reservations. "Naturally," I acknowledged. "It's a significant change from your current trajectory with Demarest." "My concern is not the financial terms," my father said. "It's the governance structure. This gives you effective control of the combined entity." "Yes," I agreed simply, "it does." My father's jaw tightened. "After 14 years building this company." 29, I corrected. "You founded Hartman and Lowell 29 years ago. And in those first 15 years, you created something remarkable. The last 14 years, however, have been largely my work, my client relationships, my strategic direction." "With my guidance," he insisted. "With your interference," I countered calmly. "Your need for control has been the company's greatest liability. It's why we're sitting here now instead of celebrating continued success." Lawrence cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Perhaps we could focus on the benefits of the proposed structure, the continuity for clients, the preservation of the Hartman name through the foundation." My father glanced at the term sheet, finally picking it up. "And if I refuse?" "Then you proceed with Demarest," I said. "They'll absorb what's left of your client base, retain perhaps 20% of your staff, and within a year, the Hartman and Lowell name will exist only in SEC filings documenting the acquisition. There are other options, such as, we could fight, challenge your client solicitation practices. There are legal avenues." "Dad," I interrupted gently. "We both know that would be mutually destructive, and we both know what information might emerge during discovery." His eyes narrowed. What exactly are you implying? I met his gaze steadily. The contents of your contingencies folder, particularly the MW subfolder. The blood drained from my father's face. For the first time in my life, I saw him truly shaken. How did you? It doesn't matter, I said. What matters is that I'm offering you a dignified exit, a way to preserve your legacy while acknowledging the reality of our current positions. Lawrence leaned forward. Robert, I've reviewed the terms. They're fair. More than fair, given the circumstances. My father was silent for a long moment, his eyes never leaving mine. I saw in them a complex mix of emotions, anger, yes, but also something that might have been respect. Or perhaps just resignation. You planned this from the beginning, he finally said. From the moment you walked out after Dylan's promotion. No, I replied honestly. I planned to build something new. This, I gestured to the term sheet, only became possible when I discovered how thoroughly you had planned my exit. Another long silence. Then, I want 3 modifications to the terms. First, the foundation bears both family names Hartman-Whitaker, not just Hartman. Second, I maintain a non-voting board seat for 5 years. Third, the press release credits me as the architect of the merger. Strategic concessions, all of them. Nothing that affected the actual power structure or financial terms. Classic Robert Whitaker negotiation tactics focus on the symbolic wins when the substantive battle is lost. Agreed, I said without hesitation. Lawrence, will you have legal draft the revised agreement? My father extended his hand across the table. You won. I didn't think you had it in you. I accepted the handshake, his fingers cold against mine. That was always your blind spot, Dad. You never saw me clearly. 2 weeks later, we announced the merger. The press release, carefully crafted by both communications teams, positioned the move as a visionary consolidation orchestrated by industry pioneer Robert Whitaker, with the full support of rising star Maggie Whitaker. Dylan's appointment to lead the Chicago office was highlighted as evidence of the family's continued commitment to excellence. The industry reaction was overwhelmingly positive. The Demarest CEO sent a tersely worded congratulation, his disappointment evident between the lines. Anders Blake hosted a celebration dinner for key staff from both firms, his satisfaction at the outcome obvious in his expansive mood. My father attended the dinner but left early, citing fatigue. We had barely spoken during the integration planning beyond necessary business discussions. I knew the wound to his pride was still raw. Perhaps would always be. The Valencia Conference leadership announced the theme for the following year's event, Legacy and Innovation Bridging Financial Generations. As chair, I would deliver both the opening and closing addresses. 3 months after the merger, Whitaker Hartman's first quarterly results exceeded all projections. The client retention rate stood at 97%, unheard of in acquisition scenarios. The Chicago office under Dylan's leadership was already profitable, his natural talent for team building proving valuable in establishing our presence in the Midwest market. One evening, as I worked late in my office now located in a new building that housed the combined operations, my assistant informed me I had an unexpected visitor. Your father is here, she said hesitantly. He doesn't have an appointment, but... It's fine, send him in. My father entered, looking somehow both smaller and more himself than at our last meeting. He carried a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses. I hope I'm not interrupting, he said. Not at all. What's the occasion? He set the glasses on my desk and began unwrapping the foil from the bottle. The Singapore expansion. The announcement went out this afternoon. You're following our press releases? I asked, surprised. I follow everything about Whitaker Hartman, he replied. It's still partly my company, even if only in name. The cork popped with a satisfying sound. He poured 2 glasses and handed one to me. A toast, he proposed, to surpassing expectations. We clinked glasses and sipped. The champagne was excellent. He had always had impeccable taste. Why are you really here, Dad? I asked after a moment. He set his glass down and sighed. To apologize, I suppose, though the word seems inadequate. For what specifically the promotion decision, the forged document, the 2-year plan to force me out, all of it, he admitted. But mostly for not recognizing what was right in front of me. You were always the future of the company. I was too blinded by traditional thinking. You mean sexism, or just garden variety paternal preference for your son? He winced. Perhaps some of both, plus a generous portion of ego and control issues. At least you're self-aware, I acknowledged. Getting outmaneuvered by your own daughter tends to prompt some reflection. He picked up his glass again. You know, your grandfather once told me I'd never amount to anything, that I lacked the killer instinct needed in finance. Clearly he was wrong. I built a successful company? Yes. But when it really counted, when I faced a truly worthy opponent, I lost. I studied him across the desk. Is that how you see me as an opponent? I did, he admitted. Now I see you as my legacy. The best part of it, anyway. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of decades of competition and misunderstanding between us. Dylan is doing well in Chicago, I said finally. So I hear. He calls occasionally. Seems happier than I've seen him in years. He needed the right role. He was never cut out for what you wanted him to be. My father nodded slowly. Neither of you became what I expected. You both became something more. He finished his champagne and stood. I should let you get back to work. Thanks for stopping by, I said, meaning it. At the door, he paused. The Valencia conference next month, will you be announcing the Asia expansion? Among other things. I'll be watching the live stream, he said. Congratulations, Maggie. You've built something remarkable. After he left, I stood by the window, champagne in hand, looking out at the Boston skyline. The building that had housed Hartman and Lowell was visible from this angle. Its lights still illuminated, though the offices now stood empty, awaiting new tenants. I thought about the journey that had brought me here, the betrayal that had become an opportunity, the anger that had transformed into determination, the family business that had become my own on terms I had dictated. My phone buzzed with a text from Anders. Singapore team arriving tomorrow. Dinner at 8. I texted back a confirmation and put down my glass. There was still work to do. An empire to build. A legacy to create, one that would bear my name from the beginning. He got the title. I had the clients. They handed my brother a legacy. I handed them a collapse. 1 forged document, 4 phone calls, and a keynote speech later. Hartman and Lowell was history. But this wasn't a story about revenge. It was about remembering who built the empire when it crumbled. And I was just getting started.